Welcome to the Ashford Teaching and Learning Conference. My name is Catherine Myers, and I will be your host for this session. I'm excited to introduce Educator Self-Awareness and the Effects on Teaching Success, presented by Dr. Michelle Rosser-Majors, who is the BA in Psychology Program Chair at Ashford University and the author of Becoming an Integrated Educational Leader. The chat window will be open during this session for your questions and comments, as well as a short Q&A at the close of this session. Now, without further ado, Dr. Michelle Rosser-Majors.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everyone. If you're out on the West Coast, I hope you're on your second cup of coffee or maybe a tea. On the East Coast, you're thinking about lunch already. So we have a lot of folks with us from all over the country, so I welcome all of you, and I hope you enjoy this area of presentation. Basically, what we're going to be talking about today is self-awareness, and especially about the awareness of self-care as instructors and educators. So first, did you actually know that by increasing your own self-awareness, you can actually increase your own satisfaction in life, but even more importantly, when it comes to what we do, we can increase the satisfaction of life for our students. And also, this is a really rare subject to discuss, and there's not a lot of information out there. But it is something that needs to be discussed more. In helping fields, much like nursing, we talk a lot about the self-care necessary, but not with educators, and it can be just as important. So first of all, self-awareness. We're going to look at self-care. We're also going to take a quick moment look at self-motivation and also our predispositional beliefs and how we respond to certain things based on these beliefs. So by basically looking at our own lives, looking at a bigger picture, we can actually become more satisfied in our careers and our life, and also become a better educator. So Mark Yarnall says, a leader is someone who demonstrates what is possible, and my opinion is that's what we do as educators. We try to encourage and invoke dreams and success for people, and so throughout this presentation, you'll actually see that I actually discuss us as leaders and not just educators. I do want to quickly note that this information is from a model that basically looks at the wholeness of educators. The circled area is actually what we're going to focus on because this entire model would actually take several sessions. So we're going to basically look at self-awareness and our own management. So significant to this is the hierarchy of needs theory, emotional intelligence, and self-determination theory, and you'll see these intertwined throughout the presentation. So first of all, self-awareness. By understanding your abilities and your health and your biases, that is going to increase and enhance your ability to be a teacher. Also, the online actually offers some environmental challenges, so it is important to know yourself first. And without acute self-awareness, it's not possible actually to be a good team player and or successful educator. Parker Palmer actually says that good teachers are the ones that have capacity for connectedness. Connections are held not in their methods, but in their hearts as a place where intellect, emotion, and spirit converge in the human self. He also states that teaching is more than a technique and that it's actually very necessary for us to become very self-aware of our own behaviors to become and make those connections that we have to make with students. So basically what we're going to look at is is your tank right now full or empty? Let's ask the following questions of each other. You know, are you getting enough sleep right now in your life? Are you in a healthy relationship? Are you in pain? It could be physical or emotional pain. This can have to do with age. It can have to do with circumstance. Are you organizing your work day to manage your work life? Are your words to students actually encouraging them, or is the frustration you're feeling in your class, is that coming out through that? Are your emotions right now in check? Or do you happen to have a kind of the ability to overreact to situations, take it a little bit more personally? Are you exhausted? And that's something that we talk a lot about, is even if you're getting sleep, if you're feeling exhausted during the day, this can be emotional and physical things that you need to deal with. So why do we look at even emotional health? First of all, because we don't talk about it enough. One's emotions actually play an imperative role in how we behave. As cognitive training whether you are teaching writing or you're teaching how to create web design or graphic design, whether it's math, statistics, we are all trained in certain areas. However, the knowledge about how to take care of ourselves and to become good educators is not always a part of our programs and necessarily what prepared us to get to this point to work with students. And also people forget that as much as we try to say we leave our emotions at home, the brain that actually deals with these emotions are very connected to how we logically think and to our cognitive abilities. And so it's extremely important to know what's going on in our lives, how it's coming out in other facets of our lives, and especially if we're in a time of stress, which we cannot get away from, especially as educators. So again, stress is an inevitable part, and so emotions do play a part in it. So what actually are you saying to your students without words? As we go through this, I want you to consider in your own online learning environments what you're actually saying, because our emotions can come out through the words. It could be that we're very short with students. It could be that we're over-analyzing what they're saying to us. Maybe we're taking things more personal when they're having emotional issues. So self-care tends to be the most important thing to consider here, and taking that time to do that. This can be in regards to your emotional health, psychological, and your physical health. And so we're going to talk about different strategies today and things to look for, whether in yourself or in your colleagues or in your students. So the key to successful leadership is influence and not authority. So you are actually the leader in your classroom, and I think we forget that. However, are you a healthy leader? Similar to the health profession again, we must continually manage our emotional and physical stress. When you're engaging with others and you're grading papers and you're doing all these things, sometimes we need to be also mindful of your own needs to walk away and come back in so that we can be better educators. So does stress affect your work life? Frank Herbert says the mind can go either direction under stress, toward the positive or toward the negative, on or off. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconscious at the negative end and hyperconscious at the positive end. The way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training. So as we go through this, I remind you, we can train ourselves how to respond to stress, how to respond to our needs, whether it be motivational needs or our biases. We can train ourselves, but we have to be very self-aware to do so. So it's very important as we look at this. You know, most of us have been on a plane, and they constantly tell us, do not put that mask on a child until you've taken care of yourself. And in teaching, this analogy is important. Unless you're putting your own mask on first and taking care of yourself, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to reach out to other students and be that light that they need. So blockades in our life, those are the things that stop us from being that educator. Mainly it's just the key is to become aware of your own needs. But these blockades also not only prevent us from being good educators, but they also prevent us from forming healthy collegial relationships. And I think especially in this online environment, because I mentioned that we have more complications in this environment, that need and understanding of how to communicate with one another and create healthy relationships is also an part of this emotional balance that we need to find. In Mind is a Healer, Mind is a Slayer, it says generalized and unabated stress places a person in a state of disequilibrium, which increases his too early around this place, susceptibility to a wide range of diseases and disorders. This is another thing we're going to look at. As we get stressed, we also become more susceptible to disease and to getting sick, which again affects how we are as educators. So work stress imposes enormous and far-reaching costs on workers. The relationship between mind and body is fascinating. And until we actually address what's going on in our mind and in our hearts and our souls, it might be affecting our actual productivity and our actual engagement with students. It's hard to get healthier. It's hard to get better at what we do. So managing the stress is essential. So finding balance. That's the key here is what is going on in your life that is stress, because again, we cannot get away from stress, and we'll talk about some different levels of stress, but also our needs. What do we need? In teaching, this is not a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle. It's not a job. Teaching is personal. Teaching is all-encompassing. It's multifaceted, and it's who we are. And so the stress that comes out of profession when we live it 24/7 is not discussed enough. but we can actually be very, very supportive to one another and also understand our abilities and what we need better by doing this. So basically, if we look at how stress can affect our life, we can quickly just look at the graph more than anything. As we become stressed and things increase, so things start to cycle out of control, some of the things that we do is we have less energy, our productivity goes down, our patience becomes very short at times. What happens when these things happen is that others in our collegial groups, even our students, actually may lose respect and esteem for us. Once this goes along long enough, we actually can begin to lose the self-respect for ourselves. What does that do? That increases our stress again. And then the cycle continues over and over to the point that it, to a point, can get out of control. And again, so in the cycle of managing stress, the Department of Human Services says that 70 to 80% of all illnesses are actually stress-related when we go to the doctor. So understanding ourselves and our needs, identifying the skills that reduce stress, becoming more proactive in our own lives and what we need, boosting our physical and psychological health, our self-confidence, and our personal relationships will all end up leading to increased success with students. This increase in students will also help us better understand ourselves and our own needs, and this more positive cycle will continue. Quickly remember that not all stress is bad. Eustress is a type of stress that we all have and actually enjoy engaging in. I'm not a big roller coaster person. My daughter is, and she loves it. But the games we lost, I know in our area, sorry, any New Yorkers out there, we have a lot of Kansas City Royals fans out here. And, you know, their excitement was this type of stress. They were excited for their team. However, acute stress, and this is something we have daily, and we always say we're not stressed. We are. Everyone has acute types of stress. Usually they're short-term. Sometimes we can look at them as positive, and I look at things like that, maybe a wedding or a birthday party or different things, but it's really stressful putting it together, but we go, oh, it's positive, it's a good thing. However, day-to-day we face deadlines, road rage, just things that happen in our life, and this is actually acute stress, and without this day-to-day management, it can actually start to roll out of control. Some of the things that we need to watch for in ourselves as well as with our colleagues and our friends is, you know, emotional distress. If someone's becoming more angry or irritable, maybe showing anxiety about things, and that's not a norm for them, you know, we ought to reach out. Muscular problems. I know this is really, really common with some of my own colleagues, are the headaches, jaw pain, just, you know, you kind of hurt. Stomach and gut problems where you're having acid reflux lots of times. All of these are signs that maybe you need to start taking care of your stress situation, because when you have all of these issues, it is harder to deal with your students. And of course, elevations in blood pressure and sweaty palms and things like that can also be signs of acute stress. But what I really encourage people to note are sometimes the emotional things that we ignore. We just might get angry at someone or a student who overreacts. Sometimes there's something else going on, and we need to remember it's not us. And we need to remember that we need to really look at what's going on. Episodic acute stress is actually when the acute stress becomes more common. It's running out of control. There's just too much chaos, too much drama. We don't feel like we can really dig out of it. Some of the signs you'll see in that are some of the same as acute stress, but again, I think we start seeing it a little bit more. Increased irritability, short-temperedness, nervous energy, headaches, migraines, hypertension, chest pain, and all kinds of other types of tension. This type of acute stress and these symptoms in a workplace mix can make a very unhealthy environment. And thus, once we become more unhealthy to one another, we're going to be more unhealthy toward our students. Another type of episodic is a worrier. And if you're a worrier, I encourage you to really kind of step back, think of what you need to do for yourself to put yourself out of that chronic situation. Worriers actually think about that there's problems before there is a problem. And honestly, worries, according to the research, say that they rarely ever even realize that they display this behavior. So little ownership is taken. They actually often blame their anguish and all the things that they're going through on other people, and they feel very out of control. They actually rationalize their worry as claiming this is just who I am. But remember, being a worrier can affect your health. Effects in your health can affect your students and your collegial relationships. So it's important to consider what's going on here and how you can increase or decrease your worry. Chronic stress. It's actually one of the most taxing types, and it seems never-ending and inescapable. And once a person gets to chronic stress, which we do see in probably colleagues and friends who are in the education business, whether they're teaching, elementary, high school, online, traditional, allowing stress to become chronic is not overrated. It happens. Examples of things that can happen is being in an unhappy marriage, unfulfilling job, things that you feel like you just can't get out of. It also can lead to burnout and a sense of hopelessness. Many medical conditions are caused by chronic stress, and we can go through each one, but as you look through the list, think about yourself. Are you having any of these issues? And if you are, we're going to talk about some strategies that can be used to help. So is it really that big of a deal? It is. There are a lot of disease-causing things that happen with stress, and educators have stress. The worry about our students, the level of care that we put into what we do, increases our likelihood for chronic stress. So looking at these things that can happen, depression, heart disease, even they're coming up with stress-related cancers, we need to consider that, yes, it is that big of a deal, and yes, we need to address it. So harmful stress. Also things that in the end this can lead to is adrenal fatigue, eating disorders, autoimmune disorders, hormonal imbalances, and menopause. And all of these different things can actually hurt us in our careers, which make us more stressed because we're unfulfilled. Again, looking back at that cycle, if we don't take care of ourselves and address what's going on, that cycle gets faster and bigger. So if you think you have that silver bullet and you're going to be fine, you can get through this, no big deal, I encourage you to be more open and honest with yourself, because being proactive with your needs and what you need to help yourself is one of the very first steps in this. Other responses to consider when you're watching and trying to help one another is, in meetings, are you seeing someone that's very defensive about what they're trying to share? Do they lack empathy for others in the group? Do they actually verbally abuse one another? Or opposite, do they isolate themselves? Do they not talk in meetings? Are they scared to engage? Do they avoid the situation? Reduce productivity. And actually, I think that's easier by us looking at ourselves than even in others. We know whether we're actually fully engaging in student feedback. We know if we had to take shortcuts this week because this week has been too much. This is something that we have to be self-aware and critical to ourselves, but not in the matter of increasing our stress, figuring out a way to manage it. So listen to you. If you had a student, what would you tell your student who's suffering from any of these things that we've talked about, whether it be emotional overload, stress, unhealthy life choices, they're just not handling your course well, what would you tell them? Well, then take your own advice, and that's much about what this is about. Is most of us know what to do, we just don't. And honestly, in our career, we tend to think about others first anyway. But it's time to kind of relook at that, because just like you hear a parent, if a parent isn't good to themselves, they can't be good to their children. Same way in education, we have to take care of ourselves as well. So, preventing burnout, you must continually engage in self-care. Remember, put that mask on first. Teaching, education has some of the highest attrition rates across the country. Burnout is prevalent. Much of that has to do with concern, stress, and not being able to handle it and maintain it. So strategies you can work with. Take charge of your thoughts and your emotions and the way you deal with problems. Train yourself. We talked about that earlier. Training yourself is extremely important on how you address something that happens in a meeting or happens with a student. I have a particular student right now that she's just really struggling, and she's angry. And her advisor and I spoke, and I said, this can't be about me, because everything I've done for her has been to help her. And so the advisor took some time and called the student, and spot on. This student is going through a lot of stuff right now, and I'm just a good corner to yell at this point, and that's okay. As long as I realize that my patience is going to affect whether she has the ability to succeed or not to succeed. So training ourselves not to overreact. And remember that acute stress can or may not be, it's unavoidable, but episodic and acute stress and chronic stress, that kind of stuff damages our health, which damages our ability to be good educators. But we can minimize it by keeping your life organized, reducing chaos. And remember, this looks differently to each of us. My chaos may not look like your chaos. How I organize my life may not look like how you organize your life. You know, our worlds, we actually, in another session that we were practicing last week, you know, we were talking about all of the different environments that those of us, because of so many of us are being online and we're remote, we live. And so for some of you, all that traffic driving into the city is no big deal and not a stress. For me, I live out in a ranch, very secluded, that would stress me out. So remember, also when we help one another, what this looks like looks differently to each of us, and being empathetic to how that looks to one another is one of the best ways we can support one another. It's also managing your time. I find that if I let myself get behind, my stress goes up. And so I keep lots of lists and check them off. But that's what that looks like to me. That's how I establish my priorities when it comes to my work. But I also have priorities with our 5 children and the things that we do in our lives. And so I organize and figure out how I can get those things accomplished without increased stress as well. But you have to really, really think about it. And also make time to have a positive life outside the classroom. You know, I hear a lot of people say, you know, this last Saturday I went with my spouse and we went and enjoyed this concert, but gosh, I feel guilty. I should have been in there grading more. I should have been doing this. I encourage each of you to do what you need to do to take care of yourself without guilt. And the reason is that your productivity increases when you have yourself under control. More things can get done in the time that needs to happen when you are more balanced, when you are more healthy. So set clear boundaries between your personal life and your professional. In my particular case, what we've chosen to do is we have a loft area. That is my office. There is nothing up there but my office. And the kids know, the family knows, everyone knows that's my space for work. When I come out of my space, that's my personal life. And so I had to really create a way where I had differing areas. And when I run upstairs, everybody knows I'm off limits until I finish what I need to do. You also by doing some of these things, you'll be more fully present. So when you're at work, you're at work. When you're with your families, your friends, you're with your family and your friends. This time actually has more quality to it, both in work and play. Plan evenings out with your family and friends if this is something you enjoy doing. Try not to make excuses for doing that. Sometimes when we're tired, it might just take that evening out to the movies to regenerate us. Also set aside adequate time for nurturing yourself in those relationships. And again, don't feel guilty about not grading that night or that Saturday or that Sunday. And what nurturing yourself looks like to you, it probably looks different. We all have different things in our lives that we do. Write a list out. What would you like to do for you? What would make you feel more healthy? So your mental health, it's up to you today to start making healthy choices. Not choices that are just healthy for your body, but also for your mind. People often avoid the topic because they think it will never happen to them or because mental health has such a stigma attached to it. I remind each of you, depression, anxiety, and other disorders affect millions each day. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you're having a rough time. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you've gotten yourself overstressed and need to sit back and reorganize. In this field, I am an advocate that we need to be there for each other, lift each other up, encourage each other, help take things off each other's plates when we need to, because what we do is important. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reports that only about 17% are considered to be in a state of optimal mental health. That's not a lot of people in good health. And again, so this should take away the stigma that we have and that, oh, they're just stressed out today. Stress is important to address, and it's real. In a recent Teacher Support Network survey, the majority of teachers, 89% of them, blamed excessive workloads for their mental health issues. And 40% wouldn't talk to anyone about their mental illness because it was seen as a sign of weakness. So they aren't talking about it, but they feel overloaded. But I also remind you, are they taking steps to organize their lives in a way that'll help balance that workload a little bit better? Not always possible, but addressing it is important. Also, according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities and can cope with the normal stresses of life. So again, reminder, state of well-being doesn't mean there aren't stress situations. It means you can handle the stress. You can work productively. You can be fruitful. You can contribute. It's actually been estimated that by the year 2020, depression will be the second leading cause of disability. This is scary. We can't lose more good teachers. And I know that if you're here today, you want to be the best teacher you can be. So I encourage you to address your own needs. And again, in this, there are so many different things that you can see as symptoms, because depression might be that next step for someone. The feelings of guilt, the fatigue, the insomnia. But also, look at yourself. Are you having any of these problems? Appetite loss, these pains, headaches, and what should you do to help? And who can help you? Because a lot of us are there. So remember, this is not always easy. One thing that I encourage you to do is rate the following on a scale of 1 to 10 is, what is your own current state of balance? Where 1 is actually completely unfulfilled and 10 means you're completely fulfilled. What is your current physical health? What about your emotional health? Are you honest with yourself about where you are? And if you're not, do you need to rewind and really address some of these issues? Do you feel in control? Do you feel like your stress is decreasing, increasing? Where are you at currently? Can you think of 3 things right now that you could do to have a positive impact on your well-being? Are you actually willing to give up the things that increase your stress? And I will just share, that is tough to do. If there's unhealthy relationships causing stress, if there's unhealthy loads that are causing stress, you have to be the first one being willing to back up and say, I can't do this part of this. You currently participate in outside activities that help you balance your work and personal life. If you don't, why or why not? Do you have an accountability partner? Do you have somebody that can come to you and say, hey, you need a break? Or a colleague that can tell that you're in a stress mode and can encourage you to go for that cup of coffee or that tea or go for the yoga workout or take just a walk? Do you have somebody that you can talk to about these things? Also, other things to consider would be good eating habits, checking your body composition, because that can actually bring on illness, exercise, sleep, managing your chronic pain. I think that that's an important area as well. Seeking massage, taking breaks for leg pain, addressing this openly that this is an issue is important. Maintaining healthy relationships outside of workplace. If you're in toxic relationships, I encourage you to actually be honest with yourself about those and how they are not fulfilling a part of your life that you need to be tended and well taken care of. So additional consideration, self-motivation is something we want to quickly look at here. As we move through this in your self-awareness walk, take a look at what motivates you, what's important, and how can you get what you need, and are you actually getting what you need right now? Based on the model, we look at self-determination and we talk about autonomy and competence and belonging. Where do you stand in those areas in your life? Do you feel like you belong to this organization? Do you feel like it's important? And if not, what could happen to help that look better for you? And is there someone you can go to say, hey, I need this? Are you feeling autonomous in your courses? If not, how can you find that for yourself? And what does that look like for yourself? Also looking at, what past relationships might be affecting success in your life. This is an important area to consider. Often our past relationships, whether it's a past boss, a past university, a past teaching opportunity, if we had a bad experience, we take those unconscious beliefs that can happen into future environments. And so it's important to address, okay, maybe I'm responding to this person this way because what I went through 10 years ago, and really being aware of why you're responding the way you're responding. Past supervisors, past colleagues. In my past, I had to, I spent about, probably 8 years in a research one. Great environment, except that it's very different and it's not student-focused. It was tough because for me, students are the most important thing in my life. And what I found is that relationship for me wasn't healthy because I could not get people on my bandwagon to have them understand how important our students' lives were. to that situation. Research in this particular case did take precedence. And so for me, it was important to find me an environment, which I have now, and it makes me very excited and much less stressed that people are focused on our students and learning and helping people to accomplish their goals. So looking at our past and how it affects us is highly important. So do you have decreased motivation right now? Although health is an important variable that we talked about, also addressing if your decreased motivation, because what happens is sometimes our motivators don't necessarily affect our teaching style or that we're dedicated, and instead other things happen that people can't see but you can. Maybe you're not as stringent grading, makes it easier. Less engaged with your students, makes it easier. You have lower expectations due to your time constraints, less dedication to take care of yourself. So those are the things that we need to consider. And if you're not motivated, what can help you become motivated is important. Ask yourself what drives you. Do you like working with others? Do you need recognition? Do you need more challenges? Being self-aware of your needs as an entire embodiment of who you are is important. So filling your tank in others, be empathetic. Be aware of what's going on in your organization, and then be a server. Be able to understand the needs of those around you. Social awareness is the next step in this, but you can't get there without filling your own tank. After yours is filled, you can help others to fill theirs. Bias is another thing. We all have it. Predispositions about what life will look like can affect us, increase our stress. I encourage you to double-check your biases and your self-awareness there. These are learned behaviors. We learn to be biased, whether it be about students that don't engage or students that don't do what we think they ought to do, what our colleagues do that we don't think they need to do. These are learned behaviors, and working through that and being honest with ourselves is important. Your understanding of yourself, it includes your ongoing health and your motivational needs and your cultural competence in the classroom is important. Your learners need your empathy, your acceptance, and your respect in acknowledging their individual differences as well. Incidentally, empathy, acceptance, and respect are those things that students look for that help them trust us. So be self-aware of your bias. Just because you have differing experiences doesn't make both of you wrong. You're an influencer. Teachers who seek to challenge their own stereotypes and biases can also develop better future leaders by influencing their students to create positive interpersonal experiences. But you have to get healthy first. Pick your social circles carefully. You need positive reinforcement, and be aware of your circumstances. And maybe it's not you, maybe it's your students, but I encourage you to be there for one another, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dr. Rother-Majors. This was wonderful. Our chat, there's so many great conversations happening in there. So what I would like to do is to begin the Q&A for this session. If you could please type your questions into the chat box, and we will watch that for you. In the Q&A session, we have about 15 minutes for that. So please, everyone, questions, type them in there, and Dr. Rother-Majors will be able to get to them. While the group is typing in their questions, I had just kind of jotted down some of the things that the participants were saying, Dr. Rother-Majors, and Frank had said he had been an online teacher for years, and this is the first time someone took the time to discuss the welfare of an online teacher. So this is very, very relevant. And then Judy actually mentioned how great this presentation was, and she thinks it would be great to include in the new faculty orientation. So excellent point there.
I thank you both, and I encourage anyone that's interested in this area to do more research because I don't think it's addressed enough. And I think that if we all learn to be those positive motivators in one another's lives, that's the first step. If we understand that we all care, I think the first step, and that empathy is important.
And then I'm happy I have our first question for you. It's from Judy Donovan. And oops, it moved away quickly. Judy said, what are some common triggers, little things that can let us know we're beginning to get stressed? For her, she said, it seems like I have to get sick before she realized she's under too much stress. You and me both, Judy.
Judy, I get that one. Very much so. I think it's going to be individually based, and honestly, that's why self-awareness is so important. I think that's what we tend to do, is we allow ourselves to get sick, and then we have the excuse, well, my body's telling me I need to rest. Well, you're right. Our body was probably telling that for a long time. I know in my own particular life, it's me being emotionally responsive to my family. My patience level goes down. A huge example back when I was teaching high school, or actually junior high at that time, is that my daughter was also in junior high at that time. And I would come home and I was ready to kick the dog. I'd had all I could take from junior hires. And so what I noticed is I was just very short. My patience level was very short. And so now I've learned that's how I check myself. If my patience level is short, I'm not taking a breath, I'm not being patient with students, getting too emotional, I know I need to do better.
And then Frank had mentioned, does course design influence instructor stress levels?
Frank, that's actually a very interesting question. I think it could. And again, we design these courses to help our students, but we do forget that they're not necessarily designed for us as educators. However, again, as being educators, as long as we're student focused, I think we have to. But yeah, I actually think it could. Connie, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm not sure where everybody else went, but sure, I would absolutely be able to. I will tell you there's an updated presentation of this that's a little bit more tight, and so if it's this presentation, absolutely, I would just use the tightened up one, but Connie, absolutely.
Woohoo, Michelle, more work for you.
Woohoo!
But
I can handle it. I have no stress.
Very good. You've already told us your secrets.
Hot tub is my secret.
What is your secret?
That's hot tub. That's one of my maintenances. If I notice I'm getting stressed, I make myself get in the hot tub for about 30 minutes before I go to bed at night, just to get myself away from technology, to relax my muscles. Because I, just like a lot of other people, I'm getting older, and I have things that I have to address. And so I have to do things, but my hot tub is my savior at times.
I wish I had one of those. Christy had the question. She says, what input or responsibility should administrators have on controlling the stress levels of their employees? Ooh, good question, Christy.
I'm trying to find it here. That seemed like a very, read that to me again. Okay, there, I found it, I think. What input or responsibility should administrators have on controlling the stress levels of their employees? I think it depends on the institution. And again, I'm the type of person that we can make all these regulations, but in the end, it really is our own ability to be self-aware. What are our needs? Administrators, we can put them in charge all day long, but if we don't tell them what we need, they aren't going to be able to do it successfully. So I go back to, we really have to do this ourselves. We have to be self-aware, and we have to communicate in ways that is encouraging to one another, because we all have differing ways of dealing with this. So I guess my answer, Christy, is no. I don't think completely an administrator can have the responsibility of that.
And Diane mentioned something. She'd like to know, who do we recommend our students to who are under much stress? So when your students come to you under stress, where do you recommend them? I would just quickly throw in to direct them to their student advisor for some talking through. But as an instructor, Dr. Michelle Rosser-Major, what do you think instructors should do?
Well, I think the wellness. I mean, we have a department that deals with student wellness, and I think it's important that we let them know that it's there for them. In this particular case that I brought up, yes, I had them call their advisor because I could already tell in some of the conversations they trusted their advisor, and that's one of the most important things is that trust. And actually, if you all get a chance, not to put a plug out there, but I've got another presentation tomorrow that is about how to form these perceived caring and trusting relationships with students, especially in this short term that we teach. But sending them to somebody they trust, but also we do have within our institution a wellness center that will help with those issues.
I love that you plugged, and yes, everyone, if you have time tomorrow, check the schedule and make sure that you can make it.
I think it's around noon Pacific time, I think.
Okay, clear your schedule, everyone. Frank had a great question. He says, what role do faculty evaluations play in the life of an online instructor? That could add some stress. Frank, yes?
Evaluations overall, I think, in every organization add stress. And you know, they're based on organizational sites. There's good ways to do those, and there's less positive ways to do those. But again, I think it looks, and that's the whole complex on why I think people don't talk about this. It looks differently to each of you. If you're a worrier, it isn't going to matter how we handle a review if you're a worrier. And you addressing that in your own life is probably important. But yeah, you know, there's a proper way to do reviews and a proper way not. And based on our past experiences with those, that affects our stress in a huge way. And again, we can't get rid of that stress, but what we can do is maybe take that extra walk that day or get that massage right before or after, just to help kind of relax us. And then also looking at the bigger picture. Are you doing your job? Are there things to improve? Great, we all have to improve, but putting it in perspective of what's coming down and just staying positive. You know, you are doing one of the best jobs across the globe, and that's encouraging people to be better and to be more. I don't think there's another career out there that's like ours. And so I encourage you to just kind of keep in the framework of what that review is. We have to do them. But yeah, how we look at them can affect our stress in a huge way.
And Judy had actually listed something earlier in the chat, which I thought was great, when she was asking, can we be too organized and try to control things too much? And I know the group chimed in. I definitely struggle with that sometimes.
Absolutely, and perfect example of being more self-aware and saying, okay, this is what happened. Now, how do I do this better? How do I balance this better? Also, I have to throw out, Connie actually stated something about she used to come home from teaching junior high and throw herself on the bed and cry. Oh, Connie, I am so there with you. My mom and a family member, and my mom is now passed, but we're junior high teachers and loved it and we're great at it. I preferred my high school kids in my 1 year of junior high. I had to give it up. So good for you for conquering it, and that's awesome, because I definitely think we have different stress boundaries for certain age groups. And I used to tell the teachers that I would train as well, if they didn't like what they were doing once they got into teaching, maybe they need to check the age, because I think different ages do have a different effect on our stress levels depending on who we are as a person. But go, Connie. That's great.
And then we have Frank. He says, what are some non-productive ways of decreasing stress?
Non-productive ways. Oh, I bet you all could all help with that one. There's lots of non-productive ways. You know, self-medication, you know, I think we see that a lot, whether it's drug abuse, alcohol abuse. You know, my mom was a teacher for years and loved it, but she definitely had a lot of stress in her life, and I know she was addicted to prescription drugs. And so I do think that people trying to have over-control in their life, that can cause people to not eat. It can cause people to even hurt their bodies by over-exercising. I mean, just trying to have some type of control in their life when everything looks like it's out of control. So I think it's a good point, Frank, and I think that is definitely a problem across our country, that we have a tendency to use bad ways of handling our stress as well.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left to go for questions. Any last-minute questions, please feel free to type them in.
Oh, Christy, I agree. I used to do kindergarten, first, second grade choir, but once a week. I could handle it once a week. I don't think I could have ever done kindergarten full-time 5 days a week, ever. I love my high school and love my college. And all of you in here, all I do is all I want you to take from this is to go be encouragers of one another. We have stress. Things change. The organization changes. Education is always trying to find a better way, and that's a good thing because we want to do it the best way, but that's stressful. So if you do nothing when you leave here or remember anything, it's just try to be encouragers of one another because really in the end, we're all trying to do something fantastic, and we need each other. And then also to just try to be more aware of your needs before you get sick. Judy, I agree with you. I do it too. So I just encourage all of you, and I hope you'll go into this and don't let yourself burn out. Don't let yourself blame it on the kids. Just find a way to be healthier because what you do is really, really important.
And Maureen has just been asking about getting slides for this presentation. Yes, Maureen, this whole presentation will be available to you in the CEDL. We will be sending out information when that's ready to go, so don't worry. You'll be able to read it all again.
And Maureen, also, if you just want it in a PDF, again, I do have the actual presentation that was supposed to be on here today that's a little tighter. And so if you want that in a PDF, just email me, and I'll send it to you. It's fine.
Well, that's our time. I want to thank you again, Dr. Rosser-Majors, for your presentation, and for all of you for attending. As I mentioned, this presentation will be available for viewing in the CEDL soon, and we will send out an email to you when the live sessions are available. Also, don't forget to go to the TLC app and rate this session. Use the link in the room, which is listed right underneath the PowerPoint slide. Use that link to complete the quick end-of-session survey, and then look for an end-of-conference survey to provide more in-depth feedback. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful day.